Welcome to Inside the Trojans Huddle, our weekly show about all things USC football and college football and pop culture and whatever else I want to talk about. And good show today. Lots going on. And we'll give very quick introductions to the usual crew because they're the usual crew and everybody knows them at this point. Mark Culkin, writer, podcaster, recruiting guru. Practice. Well, I mean, we're going to go with it, Mark. Just don't shake your head. Don't undermine me this early in the show.
2 points.
Practice report guru. How's that? You like that better? All right. Eric McKinney, editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, writer. I'm going to go with recruiting guru and hope he doesn't shake his head no. And Greg always said, and historians, I never could figure out who the historians were, but I think maybe McKinney is the historian. I'm going to go with McKinney as a USC football historian. I'm Chris Arledge, your substitute host, and we're going to jump right in. All right, guys, another week of spring practice down. Have we learned anything over the last week? Eric, what do you think?
No. I mean,
okay,
we haven't learned.
Let's move on then.
We haven't learned anything. We're going to get a sense at the spring game about the program. There's really nothing that's come out, right? It's still this team for me all the way until we get to the season. And maybe in this transfer portal stuff coming up here, if USC lands a bunch of guys where there's 2-3 years of track record, and these are not necessarily Jordan Addison type additions, but that kind of idea, right? This guy, okay, that's a guaranteed starter. That's a guy who's done it. That's a guy where you know what you're getting from him. This entire roster is, we'll see, and hopefully it takes a step forward. I think there's a lot of promise to it, but based on this spring and everything we've heard and what the coaches have said, it's still tracking that way. I think that there are certainly guys that I would bet on, certainly guys I'd bet on to take that step. And I think they're going to be pretty good. And I think they're going to be probably sure thing starters when the fall rolls around. But I don't think there's anything this spring where you say, no, that's a first team Big Ten guy guaranteed. I mean, one of your best players, maybe a top 3, top 2 player on your roster is Jonah Monheim, and he's making a huge change. And again, what you're getting out of that is I hope that works. I think it will work, but also I hope that works. And I think that's a lot of the spring. They're going to talk defensively about we're still going slow. And I think that there's a lot of faith for me in these defensive coaches. And maybe that's what we'll learn at the end of the spring, is that USC really is in good hands. What we thought coming in, they are in much better hands defensively. There is a plan going forward and there's confidence on that side. And again, we'll see on Saturday. That's going to be kind of the first real look. But in terms of what we learn, I mean, factual stuff, right? Injuries and guys being out and that sort of thing. But about the team and what we know differently about the 2024 season, I don't think that's going to kind of get shaken loose for a while.
Well, what say you, Mark? Are you with McKinney? Do we still know absolutely nothing? Or close to absolutely nothing?
I think we know a little bit more than nothing, just barely above nothing. But what we learned is the guys had an incredibly productive offseason in the weight room. We can see the noticeable difference in the body size, body shapes and styles compared to last year. Outside of that, Eric is 100% right. We haven't learned a whole lot. Maybe who some of your team leaders are. That's kind of come to the forefront. Miller Moss has kind of taken the team under his wing and carrying it forward from the Holiday Bowl. But no, we haven't learned anything. I mean, we've learned who our new coaching staff is on defense. I think we've learned that Coach Riley is maybe a little bit more humble, learned a little bit of humility coming off of last season. And I base that the way he's talking. There's a little less, I don't want to call it arrogance, maybe not self-confidence, but just a little bit more humility. Like, hey, you know what? This is what we need to do go forward. And it's not how he's saying it, it's kind of what he's saying. It's hard to describe if you're not seeing it every day. But yeah, I agree with Eric. We're not going to learn anything until we know who the starters are and who's going to actually be on the roster come May 1st. Because from April 16th through the 30th, things are going to change a little bit.
Yeah, no, look, that's the thing. Even when it comes to the roster, the team that we see this Saturday on Pac-12 Network, don't miss your last opportunity, people, to watch everybody's favorite network, is not necessarily the team we're going to see in the fall. And I'm not sure, even the guys who are coming back, I don't know how much you can trust the depth chart Saturday. I mean, if I'm the coaches, I always have at least one part of my mind focused on retaining the guys I want to retain. I'm very careful what I do on depth charts before April 30th. I mean, even after that, guys may leave, but if this coming Saturday a guy is third string on the depth chart and gets upset and disappears when you don't want him to, that's a disaster. So the thing about practice, whether it's spring practice or fall practice, it's hard to tell what you have as a football team when you're playing against yourself. I mean, it's pretty obvious in some ways. Is the offensive line good? Is the defensive line bad? It's hard to know. And everybody knows what's coming, right? When you've been practicing, you know what the defense does. The defense knows what the offense does, and so there's a level of awareness that you won't necessarily get in games where teams pull out new wrinkles and you haven't seen this on film. You're not used to seeing this kind of offense, and so it's just different. You can tell things about individual players, I think, right? You can tell if a guy looks bigger and faster, if a guy is dominated in a way he hasn't dominated in the past. You can tell that. I mean, you could tell early on that Caleb Williams had extraordinary physical ability, right? I mean, you could tell that. That didn't mean you knew exactly what kind of season he would have, but you knew that guy had a special arm, right? But so I don't know what we're going to know after Saturday. We'll know a lot more than we know right now. Right now, it's hard to know much of anything. If you go out Saturday and you see guys once again who are on the edge, unblocked, and still don't keep contained, if we see that Saturday, then when we know that things have not gone to plan in spring practices, right? Because that's the sort of thing that's supposed to be dead and gone with the new coaching staff. And even if you're implementing things slowly, you implement contain relatively early in the defensive package. So if we can't do that still, then I'll be worried. I suspect that's not going to be the case. But okay, so we don't know much yet, but make some predictions. What do you think we're going to see Saturday at the spring game? What should people be looking forward to? Go ahead, Mark.
I think everyone should anticipate seeing a good physical contest. That's something that I think we saw last year in the spring game. They're not opposed to letting guys tackle each other, take them to the ground. None of that thud type of atmosphere. I do anticipate Miller Moss being QB1, Jaden Mayaba on the other side. I'm hoping to see the running game. I want to see the offensive line show that physicality that Josh Henson's been talking about. He mentioned a few practices ago that, the defensive linemen, they're putting their hands on them. They're playing through them. Sean Newell talked about, we want to play through the other guy's heart. So I want to see that type of environment on the field. I don't care who catches how many touchdown passes, who runs for 100 yards, who intercepts. I just want to see a physical football team. Everything else will take care of itself. So just show me a different team than what I saw last year. Show me a running game. Show me the offensive line. Show me the defensive line. Like you said, Chris, they're not shooting gaps and missing the guy they're supposed to be touching. Just get a hat on hat. Let's play football. I just want to see the basics. And if I see the basics and I see the fundamentals and I see some development, I'll feel better about what's going to happen in the fall.
Yeah. What about you, Eric? What are you expecting to see Saturday? What should we be looking forward to?
Yeah, I think along the line of scrimmage, what Mark was talking about, right? Where are you playing the game? Are you two steps upfield? Are you two steps in the backfield? What line is kind of leaning on the other line, and where is that? I would love Elijah Page to not get beat quickly consistently, right? Not that that's an expectation, but it would be great to see him come out specifically and put together a really good game just to give you some faith and some confidence in him being that guy at left tackle and taking that step forward after playing a bit as a true freshman. But that's still a big ask for a guy without a ton of experience to be the guy at left tackle without really any kind of backup if Joe Monheim has to be your center. So a big game for him or an impressive performance would be nice. Of course, then you start talking about, can we get pass rush on the edge? But whatever, that's different. What I anticipate is Zachariah Branch making a play where he reminds everybody, oh, that's right, we've still got that guy. I think he has a chance to be phenomenal. I think you're going to see a play maybe from each of those 2023 receivers. I think Marshawn Lloyd, you remember he had like one play where it was like, oh, okay, here's this guy. I think Woody Marks has a chance to do that. And then specifically that secondary, I know John Humphrey, not there for the rest of spring, but the rest of those guys, I think that there will be an obvious step up in that secondary, just in terms of communication, being in the right spot, where those guys are, that kind of veteran aspect that you added across the board back there. I think that can show up in this game. And I know I say that like the sentence after I said expect the wide receivers all to make some impressive individual plays. But I think that is another thing where you can get a sense of, okay, this defense probably does have it together just based on that. I wouldn't expect that same, just where you're kind of expecting every other play, okay, this thing's going to get let out the back end and go for 70 yards because three guys weren't in the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can see some interesting things in the individual matchups. Eric pointed out one big one. Do we have a left tackle that can handle big time edge rushers? And I actually think USC has some real edge rushers on this team. I think there's some experience there. There's some talent there. I mean, Braylon Shelby, I think, is going to be a monster this year. I think, for that matter, I suspect Cameron Fountain, as advanced as he is physically, is probably already ready to make some plays. So I think we'll see something about the tackles, not just Elijah Page, who I think everybody expects will probably perform pretty well. But also the right tackle spot where Mason Murphy is there, and I don't think anybody knows what to expect there, right? I mean, is Murphy a tackle? Is he a guard? Is this a guy who has taken what's pretty impressive physical talent and turned it into consistent performance? I don't know, but we'll see something there. Similarly, I think the interior matchups, Bear against Pragnon or Bear against Monheim, right? These are individual matchups that are interesting. Offensive line play can go south for all kinds of reasons because guys are blocking the wrong guy and that sort of thing. But if you're there will be situations where you see individual matchup against interior guys one-on-one, and I'll be curious to see how that looks. I want to see whether or not our other Elijah on the defensive side of the ball, now that he's up to almost 300 pounds, does he still have the quickness that jumped out on tape when he was in high school? And if so, is he going to be a problem? I think he's going to be a problem, but I want to see it. I want to see what happens with Anthony Lucas. Where does he line up and what does he look like? That's a guy who has in the past done things in practice that impressed people and never really did anything on Saturdays. But I still want to see, where do they have him playing and what is he doing? And maybe in a simplified defense where the coaches are more focused on guys knowing what they're supposed to be doing, maybe Anthony Lucas looks like the 5-star that we expect him to be. I don't know. And of course, the corners and the wideouts. I think Eric's right. I think this is a much better secondary, a lot more depth, a lot more length, a lot more experience. I think this is a good group, but they're going up against USC. Doesn't have a ton of wide receivers on the roster, but they got some dudes that can play, right? Those 4 freshmen from last year were exceptional as freshmen. They're going to be better this year. Every single one of them will be better this year. You make a huge jump between your freshman and sophomore years in most cases. And those guys are just immensely talented. I am really looking forward to the matchups there. I think we're going to learn a lot about what that secondary has when we see what they do with guys like Jacoby Lane, right? I mean, if you can cover him, you have a chance to cover a lot of people. So I think it's going to be interesting, and if nothing else, we at least get to see something finally after a very long time.
You know what else we're going to learn?
Yeah.
Yeah. What else we're going to learn is fan support, right? Right now. How many show up to this thing? And we've talked about, right? This is your introduction to the Big Ten. If you're USC, Penn State's coming out, like even the smaller fan base teams in the Big Ten, they're gonna travel. If USC fans don't fill up the Coliseum this year, those Big Ten teams will, and they will for a few years now, because it's going to be the first trip over like the next 3 or 4 years for a bunch of these teams coming in. So this will be, it's always that, right? It's always that, oh, we had more spring game fans, we had more, and right, who cares ultimately? But it is an interesting kind of talking point, especially in light of, like we said, you're going to get some Big Ten fans coming in this season. So to see kind of what that support looks like on Saturday, and USC now kind of early in the week starting that push, hey, come on out, come on out. It's always just another kind of thing to see for USC spring game.
Yeah. Look, all of USC's home conference games are going to be sellouts over the next few years, right? They just are, because the Big Ten fans will come out to LA. I mean, they're going to be thrilled to come out to LA. What the composition of that crowd looks like is anybody's guess. I mean, there was that year that Nebraska played at Notre Dame some years ago, where it was like 70% red in Notre Dame Stadium. And I know Notre Dame was humiliated by it.
UCLA sold their Rose Bowl allocation tickets to Wisconsin and Nebraska. I mean,
yeah. I mean, look, it's entirely possible for that some of these programs that really travel are going to have 45% of the crowd at the Coliseum, right? That could easily happen. As for the spring game, I don't expect you're going to have a huge crowd in terms of Big Ten standards. We never do. I don't know how much that matters. I mean, I know that Riley would like it, but USC and Miami have both put a lot of really good football teams on the field with fan support that's a little bit spotty, and I don't expect that's going to change. And that's probably the best comparison to USC, right? In terms of location, private school, you don't have the numbers of alums that these other programs have. So, fan support is always going to be questionable at USC, and it's questionable for most LA programs. I mean, you got to win for people to show up. So we'll see whether they do that. We're not going to see Saturday. We'll see in September. Okay. So let's talk about the really interesting stuff, the stuff that everybody wants to talk about. Let's talk about the old transfer portal. The transfer portal opens up, today, if you're watching this show tomorrow, we're taping it on Monday. The transfer portal giveth and the transfer portal taketh away. Let's talk about what to expect. And let's start with this. My impression is USC fans are a little bit on edge right now. We had the Bear scare this past week, where somebody was reporting that Bear Alexander was going to jump into the portal. That was not good news. If you had a list of guys who you don't want to see jump in the portal from USC, Bear Alexander is somewhere in the top 2 or 3 of that list, right? That is not something you want. And he didn't jump in the portal. He says he's not going to. Everybody says, I don't know where all this crazy talk comes from, and I guess we'll see. But we have had a handful of guys leave, or say they're going to leave. Eric, what's your impression? One, is the fan base a little bit nervous about the whole transfer portal, and how nervous should they be?
It does seem like it. I don't know. It feels like it's kind of down the middle right now. I just don't think any fans should be nervous about the transfer portal because literally anything can happen. So if you want to try to prepare yourself for absolutely anything and everything to happen, then go right ahead. I think for USC fans, you have faith in kind of the direction of the program, and Lincoln Riley has been out in front of this from the beginning of spring. We're going to play with the guys here. We're not going to beg people to stay. It's how it goes. Now, you can see with Bear Alexander, there can be some kind of renegotiation of certain things to keep guys here. But I think ultimately you're going to be okay if you're a USC fan. And if I had to bet, I'm going to say they're going to come out certainly on the positive end of this. That's where the momentum feels like. It does not feel like they're at a spot right now where, key guys are going to jump out and guys that they really need on this roster are going to go. It feels like if they do lose guys, and so far there's three names that are either in already or we expect to go. Jason Zendamela has said that he'll go in, and Isaiah Rakes and Traquan Fagans are the three. For me, for the defensive line, right? If you're not going to stay at USC right now and get coached by the combination of Danton Lynn, who was phenomenal with the UCLA defensive front, and then Eric Henderson, who has jumped into the mix of like the top 2 or 3 college defensive line coaches in terms of development and recruiting. If it's your choice not to play for them, I don't know what Lincoln Riley or anyone at USC needs to do at that point. So they've set themselves up to have as good of an argument to keep players at USC as they possibly can. Now you get voices from, outside and family members and this and that saying, we want this, we want that. And you have to deal with that as it comes. But I think USC right now is dealing from a position of strength in terms of being able to add players that they want and have this program, I think, in a positive place where guys are not looking to flock out of here. So I am going into Tuesday pretty confident that USC, again, at the end of this thing, and they don't need to add, right? You don't have to add players in this 15-day window. They can get added whenever they want. They just have to go into the portal in the 15-day window. There's always going to be a surprise. Someone from USC, I would certainly bet, goes in where you're like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe that's, not the best thing. I think in the end, USC is going to be just fine.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, no, look, Lincoln made a point. Eric talked about it briefly. For every one guy that wants to leave, there's 100 guys dying and to stand in line to come to play at USC. So if that's the attitude that Lincoln Riley has, and look, we talk about the coaching staff that they brought in on the defensive side of the ball. That's what everybody wants to wait and see. I think USC is in a really strong position. I don't know that I'm a big fan of people renegotiating NIL after they've, kind of signed a contract. But look, when you're in a position that certain players find themselves in, I guess you kind of have that leverage. So I think that's where the fans' angst, paranoia maybe is coming from, a little PTSD of, oh, we've lost so many recruits in the past because we didn't have the necessary resources in NIL to keep guys or want guys to come to USC. USC's in a good position now. And so you had that little bit of a bear scare of like, oh, what's going on here? We're giving you everything you want. You just re-signed. You've got one of the best defensive line coaches in the country. What else do you need? So when those types of things come up, I understand why the fans can be a little nervous. I do anticipate another 2 to 3 more players leaving USC, but USC is going to benefit on the return end. What they're going to get, what they're anticipating coming out of the transfer portal, specifically defensive line, inside help. We know they're looking for depth on the offensive line. I think people are going to be happy. It's just a matter of when will those guys announce, because for the next 15 days, it's just, I'm here or I'm not here. And then you find out who's coming sometime after the spring game.
Yeah. Yeah, look, USC is in the best position to benefit from the transfer portal that they've been in since you've had a transfer portal, right? I mean, you finally have an NIL program that both seems to be better funded than the past, and USC now is in a position where it no longer is playing with one hand tied behind its back, right? There was that period of time where you had some programs who were essentially offering contracts up front and big bags of cash, and there were other programs that were saying, well, look, the NCAA says you're not supposed to do this. We're going to play it safe. We're going to do it right. USC was in the latter category, I guess, unless you listen to the Pitt head coach. But at the same time, it seemed to be overly cautious in that it seemed clear that the NCAA had no more juice, so they couldn't enforce their rules. But once you had the federal district judge come down, just weeks ago, in the Tennessee case, and say, no, they can't enforce their rules right now. Sort of the gloves came off for everybody. So USC's in a great spot. USC's in a particularly good spot along the defensive line. I don't know why Rakes left. I would have preferred that he stay, I think. But I'll also say this: USC will have a better interior defensive lineman than him come in during this period. They just will. They're right now in a position where they have an elite coach and a great opportunity for playing time if you're a big time talent, and a bigger stage than some of these guys play on. I think there are probably guys at big time programs USC wants to bring in, but USC's in a great spot. They are going to land some defensive linemen, and the defensive line group is going to look very different this year than it has over the past couple. I'm convinced of that. The one thing you do have to worry about, I suppose, is there are some spots where USC probably needs to bring in some people, but you don't want to run off the guys you have. Running back, could USC use another running back on the roster? Probably. Do I want to bring in a guy who has a track record of playing and expects to be number one or number two? I don't know. But if you bring that guy in, he better be really good, and it better be worth it to have him for 1 year instead of the guys that you have for at least 2, maybe 3 years already on the roster, right? So you have to be careful about that. Same is true at wide receiver. USC is going to bring in a wide receiver, maybe 2, I think. But I think they're going to be careful who they bring in. You have this Penn State guy who's in the portal. Are they going to bring in a guy like that? Maybe. But is that guy better than your four freshmen? I'm not sure he is. Do I want to risk running off one of the 4 freshmen, including the one we were all worried about? I'm not even going to speak it into existence. But do I want to run him off so I can get a guy who has 1 year that probably isn't better than him anyway? I do not. I mean, they brought in Richardson, the Division III kid, and that was a perfect addition, right? Because this is a guy who has some experience, has some talent. He can probably give you real minutes and make a contribution, I think. But he's also not going to run off Mekhi Lemon or Jacoby Lane or somebody like that. He's just not. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. Every time you bring in somebody from the portal, you're upsetting at least one guy who's already on the roster. And at defensive line, I don't think it matters. You have to bring in elite talent. Frankly, at right tackle, I don't think it matters. You have to bring in somebody who can play right now. But would I bring in a left tackle and tell Elijah Page that he can move to the right side or sit down? Not if I believe in Elijah Page, I wouldn't. So I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what the coaches do with that. But I'm with you guys. USC's in a position to do very, very well. I do think they'll lose some guys. I think it's inevitable. Mark says 2 or 3. I'd be surprised if it's only 2 or 3. I think it'll be more. I suspect there are more guys on the current roster that USC's coaches would like to see leave. You always have. There was that management guru some time ago that said you should always be getting rid of your bottom 10% of your employees. You might be able to say something similar about a football team. You should probably always be running off 8 or 10 guys off your roster. Because there are always going to be 8 or 10 guys that are not committed the way they should be or don't have the talent to play. And so I suspect there will be more guys leave. There may be a name or two that we don't want to see leave. I hope not. But I would point out that in a program like USC, even if you lose a guy who who you think a lot of, you're probably going to be able to replace him. I mean, you look at like Oklahoma had the absolute disaster a couple of years ago, right? Caleb Williams disappears, and it doesn't get any worse than that. And they didn't land a Caleb Williams level player in the transfer portal, but they landed a pretty good quarterback who threw for a lot of yards and scored a lot of points. So don't panic, guys. We're going to be better off after this portal than we are right now. Even if we lose some guys, we don't lose. I think that's the bottom line for me.
Yeah, I mean, the secondary is deep. The defensive line is deep. Just when you look at those position groups kind of huddled together in present day college football, your first thought is, well, not all those guys are staying. I mean, when guys want to play, the idea of, oh yeah, I'll stick around for 5 years and I'll play my fourth and fifth year, it's just not super appealing right now. And so again, like those are two spots where you'd love the depth, but when you start looking at kind of position groups, I mean, quarterback's a spot where you could have, another guy just in terms of where you would look at scholarship numbers. Running back is a spot. Wide receiver is a spot where you could add a couple. They've already talked about definitely needing offensive linemen. So then it becomes like, where are those coming from? And I know that they still have some room, but those are the two position groups, defensive line and the secondary, where it just wouldn't be surprising if somebody just said, look, this is crowded and there's a quicker path to playing time somewhere else. Again, along the defensive line, I take 40 defensive linemen and just to make sure you have all those spots right. But it does become something where guys are they love the team and the program and whatever, but they've got to think about their future and themselves as well.
Yeah, on the interior, I don't know that you may have guys leave, but on the interior, I don't know that you have to leave because you're worried about playing time right now. But on the edges, USC has some guys on the edges, and they're young guys, but they have immense talent. Some of these guys. I mean, if you're talking about Shelby and Anthony Lucas, if you're talking about Cameron Fountain, right, I mean, you line up these guys, and you're looking at guys who have NFL bodies, right? These are NFL talent guys. Whether they play like that or not, we'll see. But there, I could see some guys saying, "Man, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get on the field anytime soon." But defensive line is different than some other spots because the defensive line rotating is not a terrible thing, right? You could tell the other guys on the roster, listen, Bear was playing 78 plays last year. We want him at about 55. We need somebody to pick up 23 plays from him. And that makes sense. In the secondary, that doesn't make sense. You never need to take out secondary guys because they're tired. You don't. You just don't. I never got tired and came off the field in college playing at corner. It doesn't happen, right? So at a spot like that, that's a problem. If you're second string, you may not get on the field very much. Whereas if you're the second string defensive tackle, you're going to be playing. Anyway, go ahead, Mark.
That's why I made the argument in my article this morning about the running back room. You've got, I literally think you bring in another running back out of the transfer portal, you are upsetting the apple cart. You've got too many young guys back there. And you brought in that one veteran in Woody, who those guys know he's going to be the guy this year. But when you have two guys from the previous class in Quentin Joyner and a Marion Peterson, those are NFL bodies. And then you brought in another guy this year in Brian Jackson. That's another NFL looking type of body. If you're bringing in a running back who's turning down $400,000 to play for 1 year at his existing school, what is it telling your locker room? And that's why there are certain position groups. Yeah, bring them in. But running back, look, Lincoln Riley doesn't utilize the running game enough as it is. Are you going to say, all right, well, now I've got two guys from the transfer portal. Forget the guys that I'm recruiting. Every year, it's the guy through the transfer portal who's going to get the rock. That's sending a really bad message. I agree
with that. And I'll say this. I'll always take an elite guy over a good guy in the portal if I can get it. The problem is I do not want an elite guy for 1 year that costs me a really good football player who has 2-3 years left. I don't want that. That's because I don't want to then have to find another elite guy at that same position, and every year it's plug in a new senior. I don't want to be in that spot. So I'm with you. If you had Barry Sanders or Adrian Peterson in the portal and they wanted to play running back for USC, I suspect you take them.
Sure.
But if you don't have that, you probably have your group, and you have enough guys there that if you don't have a string of injuries, you'd be all right. But running back is a position where you often have a string of injuries. So that's a problem, right?
You got to use the running backs to get them hurt, though. That's half the problem here right now.
Yeah. Well, all right. Anything else about the transfer portal? All right. Well, we're going to have stuff to talk about next week about the transfer portal, I suspect. Next week's show is going to be all spring game and transfer portal. We won't be able to fit anything else in. Okay, I've got a question for you guys. And this has to do with recruiting strategy a little bit. And Lincoln Riley is recruiting nationally. We all know that. And he's passing on guys who I think previous USC coaching staffs would have taken from their own backyard in order to chase after guys in other parts of the country that he thinks are better. And I'm going to assume that if Lincoln Riley thinks they're better, that they are. I don't have a problem with that. But it does mean that you're in a position where if you strike out on that guy from the Deep South, if you strike out on that guy from DC, whatever it is, and the local guys have already felt your rejection, they've already signed somewhere else, they're already angry and they have a chip on their shoulder, you may not have your plan B guy available anymore. Just today, Houston Longstreet from Centennial committed to Texas A&M. I'm not Lincoln Riley. I'm not a quarterback guru. Longstreet looks pretty good to me, right? That looks like a guy who has some ability. I think he can play at this level. Probably a guy who under Lincoln Riley's tutelage would become a very good quarterback. Riley thinks the kid from Georgia, Juju, is a better player. I'm going to assume he is. I don't know what's going to happen with that kid, and neither does Lincoln Riley at this point, right? I mean, he's still taking his visits, and everywhere he goes, they're trying to give him all kinds of compelling reasons, monetary and otherwise, why he should go to their program instead of USC. Some of those programs are a lot closer to his home. So what do you think about this high-stakes game that Lincoln Riley plays, where he heavily recruits outside of California, lets California guys go somewhere else, and then we see what happens come December? All right. Eric, why don't we start with you? I introduced you as the recruiting guru. Actually, I introduced both of you as recruiting gurus, but Mark declined it. He said no.
I'm not going to make you a liar. Chris, I will never make you a liar.
Thank you.
So the California aspect of it, Lincoln Riley's gone after some California guys, right? They're in this class. It's not like he said nobody from California can play here. I think I don't have an issue with the way he goes about it, right? If you set your board, you chase the guy that you think is the best. Right now, he has a commitment from the guy that he thinks is the best at that position. I don't think there is, right? When a guy commits, you don't take him off the board. That means nothing. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed as far as I'm concerned for Houston Longstreet and USC. The commitment to Texas A&M does not matter. If USC gets to a point where he becomes number one on their board and they go full court press and they go after him, we'll see what happens then in terms of his decision, and none of this matters. You're going to run into something where you get a kid, because not all kids are the same. You're going to run into a situation where a kid's like, look, this staff believed in me. I'm going to go there. That's where I want to go. And I think you just deal with that and you overcome it. The name that you kind of threw out to us in talking about this was Taylor Tatum, the running back that USC pushed on, did not get, and then they didn't end up with him. You look at the USC running back room right now, it's okay. It's okay. I think Taylor Tatum is really good, but the way it's set up right now, until rules change and guys can't transfer and guys can't, flip commitments or whatever, there's a fix for all of it if you are good. So I think that's the key for me. You need to recruit like you are going to be really good that fall, and kids will either fall in love with it or re-fall in love or stay in love with your program. If you recruit like, oh, we're not going to be good, so we should just take this guy who's going to stay with us through the whole thing, I think you're missing out on guys that you could ultimately get. Because if USC recruits like they're going to win the Big Ten and be like a top 4 team in the playoff, that's a different discussion, right? I don't know if they're there, but we'll see. But if they recruit like that and that's what happens, that's a top 3 class if you're going after those kind of guys and then you back it up with that. So I don't really have an issue because there are so many fixes and plugins, right? You had Malachi Nelson, you lose him. Oh my God, we lost this 5-star guy and this unbelievable quarterback. You look at the 2 quarterbacks USC has available this season. Yeah, sounds good, right? You go with those 2 guys. So I think that because there are so many fixes, you can keep going the way that you're recruiting right now.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any more plug to pull anymore. Look, you've got your early signing period in December. You've got your traditional signing day in February. Neither one really means anything anymore because of the spring transfer portal. So the fact that Juju's committed today, a verbal commitment, a signed letter of intent, they carry the same exact weight. So until Juju basically says, you know what, I'm taking USC off my list, right now all he's doing is building his brand. I mean, USC isn't even getting the last official visit. I think the last official visit on his list is Colorado. That's all. To me, this is all about, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to put my name out there everywhere I go, every weekend. Plane tracker will be on me. And at the end of the day, he'll be at USC. Now, you brought the name Houston Longstreet. Here's what, they're working behind the scenes in that doomsday scenario that Chris is kind of painting for us right here. The young man doesn't even have an offer from USC right now, but he was at practice last week at 5:30 in the morning. And when practice was over, he's standing in the middle of the field having a really nice long conversation with Lincoln Riley. So something's going on behind the scenes. I mean, he committed to Texas A&M a week later after that conversation. These commitments, they mean nothing. They mean absolutely nothing until they are actually going to class in the fall.
Yeah, and maybe not even then, right? But
Yeah.
here's the thing. Look, it is better to get a commitment than not to get a commitment, because while guys will renege and go somewhere else, most of the guys that give you a verbal commitment will sign a letter of intent. Most of them. Most of the guys that show up on campus will stick around with the program and not transfer. It's just that most is a different number than it was, say, 10 years ago, right? I mean, 10 years ago, it was hard to get a transfer, and it would happen sometimes, right? Justin Fargas came in as a transfer, had a great season at USC, but that was rare. So you had to hit with the high school kids, otherwise you just weren't going to have any talent on the roster. That's not the case anymore, and Lincoln Riley realizes that some of the guys he brings in are going to leave, and I don't think he worries about it too much. I mean, Zanavella is a good prospect. I think he's going to be a really good lineman. Lincoln Riley's response was, he was still a long ways from contributing for us. And I think Riley really means that. The way he looks at it is, okay, so I have to replace that guy sometime in the next 2 or 3 years. I think I can do that, and I think he will do that. So yeah, I mean, you go after the very best guys to try to get a verbal commitment, because most of the time they stick, and most of the time when they show up, they'll stick around. That's always better than not getting a guy, right? I mean, there's a reason why when those 2 big-time defensive linemen from Georgia committed a couple weeks ago, verbally committed, we were excited about it, because that's at least some evidence that they're going to sign with USC. It's not done. Everybody knows it's not done. But it's a pretty good place to be. You would rather be USC than Georgia at that point, right? Georgia wasn't sitting around in their coach's office saying, whatever, it doesn't matter. These verbal commitments don't matter. No, they were saying, okay, that's not great. We're competing with Coach Henney now, and that's not easy. So I think he's doing it right. I do think it's worth it's worth noting, though, that Lincoln Riley's approach is far different from Pete Carroll's. They're both trying to bring in the best rosters they can, but Pete Carroll's plan was to lock down California, build a fence, keep everybody out, and then I'm going to go somewhere else if there's a first round guy somewhere else. And that's how he described it, and that's what he did. That is not what Lincoln Riley is doing. And maybe that's because things have changed over the last 20, 25 years in California high school football. Maybe it's just because Lincoln Riley comes from a program where 90% of your people come from out of state. Oklahoma's a great football program, but most of their guys aren't from Oklahoma. And so he has always been a guy who's recruiting from other places. And that's okay. You can do that. Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, they're not getting their players from within 10 miles of campus. I mean, they get some players, but that's not where most of their guys are coming from. So, recruiting nationally makes sense, and it makes particular sense these days because it just seems like guys are more willing to leave and go somewhere else than they used to be.
Consequences. There's no penalty. There's no fear. I mean, you don't even have to sit out a year if you want to transfer. So these kids are like, hey, you know what? Let's go on a field trip for a few weeks. We don't like it. We'll come back home.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And look, even Kirby Smart, who has a ton of homegrown talent and does very well recruiting those guys, Kirby Smart also realizes that everybody in the country is coming into his backyard and taking players out. That's why he's not just filling his roster with guys from Georgia. He's recruiting nationally too. You have to. So it's a different approach. It's not what USC has done traditionally, but I suspect it's probably the right thing in the here and now. Any other thoughts on recruiting strategy and pulling guys from out of state and all the rest of it? Anything we forgot?
I don't know. The only thing I'm starting to notice a trend is those natural pipelines to USC, they're running dry. I mean, name the last player from Long Beach Poly to sign with USC. Mater Dei is starting to get on that type of streak right now too. It's kind of curious. I understand wanting to get the best guys from all over the country, but at the same time, keep pruning your own trees.
How many of those Mater Dei guys have gone somewhere else been stars? I mean, obviously
that's what I'm saying.
Right?
Who are the last guys?
Yeah. I mean,
and it's not every one of them. Mater Dei produces so many, right? The days of going in and just, there's 7 pretty good Mater Dei guys, let's get all of them. Not really anymore. I mean, you got to pick and choose. I think there's one right now at Mater Dei in this class, a couple younger ones, but who's the poly guy that's gone on and been a star that USC missed on recently? It's just not. It's not every one of them like it used to be. If you took the 3 best Mater Dei guys, the 3 best Sarah guys, the 3 best poly guys, you were going to hit on a bunch of that. And it just doesn't feel like it's quite like that anymore, because that's one thing. I don't want to say one thing. Something that Lincoln Riley said that I had been kind of saying for a while, what he said is when he showed up, you looked at the roster and it was full of California guys who did not belong at USC. And that is where USC really got burned, is it felt like there would be a kid in California who had a great freshman year, became a 4-star guy, couldn't get dropped because you had relationships, and that's just kind of how the recruiting industry can work sometimes, where you don't drop a guy because he's a big name and you've done a bunch of stories on him. He's got to carry over here. And USC grabbed him because he's a 4-star guy and he looks good in a recruiting class, and he's not that guy. He's not a 1st, 2nd, 3rd round NFL pick. And it felt like USC got into trouble because there were a lot of those guys who were good high school football players without a huge ceiling. And if you don't have that big ceiling when you get to college, it's tough to become an elite player. USC just didn't have enough of those guys, especially at key positions on either line.
Yeah, look, here's the reality is that those major Southern California programs are still turning out very good players. Amon-Ra obviously turned out to be okay, right? But here's the thing, and I've complained about this about Mater Dei and Bosco quarterbacks for a long time. there's no easier job in high school football than being quarterback of one of those two teams. Every guy in your offensive line is going to a Division I program. Every one of your backs and receivers is going to a Division I program. Your defense is loaded with guys going to Division I programs. And so guys like JT Daniels, who are rated extraordinarily highly, did that guy ever have any adversity in high school? He stands in a clean pocket and throws to 4- and 5-star receivers who are wide freaking open all the time. I don't look, there was a time, it's still the case in Texas. There are plenty of Texas high schools that have multiple Division I prospects on them. But the talent is spread out so that these guys are actually playing against other big-time guys. They're also in a position where a lot of times there are 2 or 3 guys in the team that are superstars. If you're the only defensive line on your team that's a Division I prospect, the other team is doing everything they can to stop you. If you play defensive line at Mater Dei, nobody gets to do that. Nobody gets to focus just on you. The entire group is Division I prospects. Don't think that doesn't change things. It does. And so I think the Mater Dei and Bosco guys tend to be overrated. They obviously turn out some very, very good football players, but they also turn out a lot of guys that don't pan out the college level. And it's because they are surrounded by talent such that you cannot focus on them, and they have immense help at every other position on the field. And that matters in football. So I'm gonna speculate that Pete Carroll would look at California high school football today, and he would go and recruit the best guys that he could find. But I think he would also be recruiting nationally. I think you have to this day and age. I think it's the right approach. But it does leave us in the position where we're wondering whether or not we can hold on to that defensive tackle from Georgia or that quarterback from Georgia, because those guys in the South are coming after him, and they're offering big bags of cash and short drives for the parents.
The Julian Lewis thing for me, one of the things that gives you a little bit of confidence that it's USC in the end, all of his kind of growing NIL stuff feels rooted in Los Angeles. And I think that is big. If USC, right, whatever USC can do and USC adjacent properties, however we have to talk about that, whatever they can do to kind of keep him sort of locked in that arena, that becomes big, where he starts to see his brand grow, and it's because it's based there in Los Angeles. That's going to be a big selling point for anybody when it comes time to actually make a decision. If you have that sort of base and it exists in Los Angeles, and your career can really grow there, that's obviously something USC has sold or tried to sell since the very start of NIL, and it feels like it's working a little bit better now.
All right, fellas, are you ready for Arledge's questions? It's game time. Now, look, there were some complaints this past week that it seemed like I favor Eric McKinney, like I want him to win. I found that strange that those accusations were made. I assumed that everybody wants Eric McKinney to win. I didn't even think that was an issue.
I don't mind being the heel. I don't mind being the bad guy.
Somebody has to be the heel. If this is wrestling, somebody's got to fill that role, and why not you? You got the black hat on, it's backwards. I mean, look at you.
I'll do the Vince McMahon swagger walk every day of the year.
I love it. All right, here we go. Question number 1. Predict the biggest splash for USC in the spring transfer portal. Eric McKinney, start us off.
I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to say this name. I don't want to say it. I don't want to say Michael Williams.
I know what you're going to say.
From Georgia. I don't want to say it. But I've already said it. So that's what I'm going to say. Look, those whispers and that talk has been out there for so long. My belief with the transfer portal is, if you hear talk of something or kind of whispers about something and it doesn't happen within 24 to 36 hours, it's not going to happen. And it's what I've said about recruits. You talked about the Georgia commitments that have committed to USC and how the Georgia staff feels about them. it is so much easier to recruit against one school than to recruit just blanket your entire roster when you have no idea who may be talking to who or who may be leaving. So the fact that his name has kind of been floated and put out there for so long makes me so less confident that it will actually happen. But if you're talking about a big splash and what would kind of set college football on fire, USC keeping Bear Alexander, landing him, plus the talk of all the Georgia. I mean, that would be pretty massive for USC and just kind of the portal landscape. So I don't want to say him, but I'm gonna say him.
You still haven't said his name, Michael Williams.
Yes.
All right. Mark Culkin, what do you say?
Yeah. Well, Eric has the correct answer. That would be the biggest splash. I mean, that would be a cannonball type
That
of.
would be a nuclear explosion of a splash.
That is the definition of kaboom. Now, there's another name that's floating around out there, a true nose tackle. We know USC needs a true guy over the ball. Playing in the state of Texas right now. He's from Southern California. So if that smoke that's been swirling around Demonic Williams' name is accurate, that would be a secondary big bomb splash. I think everyone would be pretty excited about. And then obviously I think that offensive tackle position. I'm not hearing any specific names, but yeah. Since I have, are you asking for a name or are you just asking for the position?
I'm asking for a name. I'm asking for you guys to go out on a limb like McKinney did. But it was kind of a cautious go out on a limb because he kept saying, I don't want to say his name. And then he didn't say his name, even though we all knew who he was talking about. So
I'm going to say USC is going to get at least two big time guys on the defensive line. And I'm going to go out on my limb and say that Demonic Williams will be one of them.
I think, look, I want nothing more than for Eric McKinney to be right. I'm not going to give him a point because I feel that he may have jinxed us. I think that he's ruined our chances. And if Michael Williams doesn't come to USC, he's why. If it turns out that he's right, he'll be given 70 points that he can spread out over however many games we want in the future. That's fine. I think Mark is probably closer to a guy that we will land. I think that's probably a good bet. I think the SMU tackle is probably a decent bet also. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him as our right tackle next year. But I'm going to give Mark Holken a point because I'm not willing to hope for what McKinney was hinting at because that'll just make me disappointed and I don't want that in my life right now. So 1 point for Mark Culkin, 0 for Eric McKinney. All of you who think I always root for McKinney, just shut your faces right now. You saw that. I gave Mark the point. Okay, number 2. What's the school that when you hear a blue chip prospect has committed to them, you always shake your head and wonder why? Mark Culkin.
So make sure, yeah, blue chip prospect, not blue blood school. I'm going with Texas A&M. Every single year, you think, why? What have they done? I mean, everyone makes fun of Steve Sarkisian before last year when he made the playoffs, 7-win Sark. Texas A&M is the epitome of a 7-win program. But every year, and we know why, but every year the blue chip prospects go there, collect their cash, and a year or two later they're gone. So I think that's the correct answer.
Okay, he's going with the Aggies. Eric McKinney, what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean that's the right. So initially I wanted to say Miami, right? Miami under Cristobal now, but if you have Miami and A&M, I can more understand the location draw to going and playing at Miami than playing at Texas A&M. So that's what kind of breaks the tie for me. The Clemson's in there now, right? I could understand when you were committing to Clemson when they were winning national championships and all of that. I think Clemson kind of creeps into that now if you're a 5-star guy going to that school. But no, I mean it's A&M. It's A&M. Although I think Elko is a better coach, the best kind of coach they've had there for a while, not just flashy recruiter with nothing behind it. So maybe there's more substance to that, but no, Mark's right. I don't have a problem backing him up with that one.
Yeah, Mark is right on this one. I think there's some. I think Miami under Cristobal is an. I think Penn State is a legitimate answer. It's a program that is good but not elite. I don't really trust James Franklin, and it's a super weird place, right? And listen, Penn State fans, I know you don't like it, but everybody else in the country thinks you guys are weird, like you're in some sort of cult, which is the reason why Texas A&M is the correct answer. Because not only are they the program that consistently does less with more, and nobody does less with more the way Texas A&M does, right? I mean, they have gigantic sums of money, unbelievable recruiting grounds. They have huge fan support. They literally have everything you would want, and they find a way to lose 5 games every year anyway. It's astounding to me that they can do it, and they've done it for decades. But it's not just that. Because look, Notre Dame, USC, there are some other major programs that have had long periods of underperformance. Maybe not Texas A&M level, but still, they've done it. But Texas A&M is so weird. I know some Texas A&M grads, obviously, living where I live, you have to know some. And they're nice people. There's nothing wrong with them as individuals. But in a group, A&M fans, I mean, talk about, they have those strange rallies with all the fire and the marching. I mean, it looks like something you'd see from fascist Europe. It's weird. They're super odd. They get together and they have these guys doing these arm signals and everybody's practicing yelling. What is that? So the answer is absolutely A&M. And there's some people, if A&M fans watch this program, there can't be very many that do, but if so, you're going to be mad at me. I don't even care. You guys are weird. You're the weirdest program and the biggest underperformer. I can't for the life of me figure out why any blue chip player would go play there. I just can't figure it out. Strangest thing. Go play for Sark. Yeah, he's probably a drunk. He's probably an underperformer himself. But I would so much rather play for Texas and A&M. It's not even close. It's not even the same universe. Whatever. Everybody gets a point. It's 2-1, and I guess I got one too, because I said everybody. All right. Question number 3. Give me the first member of USC's current coaching staff to become a head coach, or maybe we'll say it this way, a BCS. Because Matt Ince was previously a head coach.
FBS.
But which of these assistants, which of the FBS, which of these assistant coaches is going to be the first one to get a head job at the highest level? Eric, go ahead.
I think it's Ince. I think that's the answer. Dan Lynn would not surprise me if they both got one maybe in the same offseason. I think they're probably that close, but yeah, I'm a little disappointed that you changed it because I was going to take the free point by answering Entz.
Yeah,
but I'll still say him.
I know you were. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, look, he's the only assistant coach on the staff who has previous head coaching experience. It's the correct answer. And Coach Entz has said, look, I stepped down from being a head coach to be a position coach because I want to be a head coach at this level. So, I mean, the writing's on the wall.
That's a good answer for both of you. I'm not going to criticize it. I do think Dan Lynn has a chance to become a head coach very quickly. I think Eric Henderson has a chance to be a head coach very quickly. I know that he hasn't even been a defensive coordinator. He's some sort of co-defensive coordinator. All these guys are co-something, co-assistant coach, co-emperor, whatever. They give him all kinds of titles. I understand he doesn't have that experience. But you're talking about somebody with Henne who has this unbelievable personal story, this charisma, recruiting ability that might be unmatched at USC since Ed O and Pete Carroll were around. That's a guy who's very, very quickly going to climb the ladder. And it would not surprise me if a program you had Colorado take a shot with Coach Prime when most of the big programs would not have hired him. I could see another Colorado type hire where they go after Henne even as quickly as this year. I hope that doesn't happen, but I could see it happening after even 1 year. I think the guy's just that impressive. Okay. Nobody gets
If
it.
Lynn, look, if Dan Lynn, after what he did with UCLA, if he does that again with USC, because of what USC's defense has been and how it's been talked about nationally, he's getting big offers
Yeah.
this upcoming offseason. That will be, if USC wants to keep him, that will be a fight. Again, that's an if, right? If he does that. But because of who his dad is and how he's grown up and the experience that he has had, he's got everything that you'd want at that point from a team trying to say, hey, we want to be serious about defense. We want a guy who knows what he's doing, and he will be a big time target.
Yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable actually. You go from a defensive staff that that really struggled badly for the last 2 years to a staff where, I mean, look, if Doug Belk got a head coaching offer after this year, that wouldn't shock anybody, right? I mean, as a former defensive coordinator, this is a good football coach. He's going to do a good job with USC secondary, I'm sure of it. If he got a head coaching job, I mean, that wouldn't be a surprise to me. So, yeah, you're talking about a lot of guys who were in a position to move on and up and probably will. And as much as I don't like the sound of that, that's what happens when you're successful, right? I mean, that's what Pete Carroll had coaches move on. Nick Saban had all of his coaches move on all the time, and that's just the way it is. Fine, I'll give everybody a point. Mark is still up 1. It's 3-2. So far, Mark hasn't had a question where he hasn't had a point. Let's see if he can do it this time. Question number 4. Was Van Halen better with David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar? Mark. What is that?
First of all, I'm just going to say that there's no or for me. Van Halen is David Lee Roth. Sammy Hagar is a scat. End of story.
Okay. He came out strong. McKinney, what do you think?
Yeah, look, yes. I don't want to agree with him. Like, but I can't. Right. So there's sometimes where when Mark goes first, I have it in my mind, like, okay, I've got both answers and I can contradict what he says this way. And then there's sometimes where I just can't, I don't have it in me to come up with that. And I just have to say, yeah, he's right.
I'm going to make an argument for Hagar real quick, though. And here's why. Now, listen, just hear me out. Hagar was a far better singer than David Lee Roth. Far better. I think that's not even close. Not even the same universe. I think a better songwriter. I actually think that Van Halen's music was better under Hagar than it was with David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth was all personality, but a remarkable personality, right? I mean, a larger than life personality. And if you're fronting a rock band, maybe that's what you need. I don't know. I saw Van Halen a few years ago with David Lee Roth in Las Vegas. I say a few years ago. It's probably more than that now. He was older, so it's not fair to say that he couldn't sing anymore, although he couldn't. Really it was just him like jumping around a little bit, not doing the splits or anything, but kind of just jumping and I watched it and I thought, yeah, I don't know. This guy was a legend, but I'm not sure that I enjoy what I'm watching here. So you guys gave the same answer.
The thing is,
you enjoy Mick
I think
Jagger,
the thing is, right?
20 years ago. I mean, it's
yeah. So Chris, what I would say to yours is you said better, right? It is a better band with Sammy Hagar in terms of, hey, write a good song, right? Like write it, sing it well, all of that. Yes. If you flip them, Hagar's first and then David Lee Roth comes in, I don't know if Sammy Hagar takes them to where they were the way David Lee Roth did. And then it feels like Sammy Hagar got the benefit of Van Halen being what it was when he came in, and then not coasting because he was good, but I don't know if Hagar started if they're at that level when they make a switch.
I think that's right.
You could have made a stronger argument by saying Van Halen with Sammy Hagar made that Pepsi song commercial what it was. So, I mean, I think that was probably the height of their popularity. But again, for me, it's still going to be David Lee Roth, though.
All right, well, you guys both gave the same answer, and I'm tired of giving everybody a point, so this time nobody gets a point. It's still 3-2. Number 5, best uniform for a college football team, and you can't vote for USC. Mark, go first.
We've already mentioned them. Actually, I'm going to change my answer right here, right now. Michigan. It's iconic. I mean, that helmet, you know who you're looking at when that helmet runs out on the field. Doesn't matter what color jersey, what color pants, when the helmet comes out, you're singing Hail to the Victors.
Great helmet. There's no question about that. McKinney, what do you think?
I'm going to say the team that Mark was going to say and then didn't say. I think it's Penn State.
Oh, he's in my head. He's right.
Yeah. So I went away from any of the kind of crazy, alternate jerseys. Ole Miss has like a cool kind of lighter blue jersey or whatever, but I wanted to stay kind of what this team wears all the time. And I think that's Penn State. I like San Diego State has kind of a cool Aztec design or whatever, but in terms of the jersey where you see that's that team, Penn State, and I'm gonna turn it a little bit, right, with the whiteout and all of that, everything that goes into a really kind of fun Penn State game. I think those uniforms are nice.
Cool. I agree.
So I think the home uniforms are nice. The away uniforms for Penn State are a little rough for me. I mean, there's just nothing there at all. They look like practice uniforms, and I don't love that. Michigan's helmet is Michigan's helmet, no matter where they're playing, home or away. I think the right answer, by the way, and a lot of USC people don't want to hear this, Notre Dame's home uniforms. Notre Dame's, not their aways. I don't love their aways. Notre Dame's home uniforms, the best uniforms of college football. Talk about an iconic helmet and that dark blue. I like the gold they have. It's not the yellow that Michigan uses, or frankly USC uses. It's a real gold. I think the right answer is Notre Dame, but because the Penn State away uniforms are just so gruesome, Mark Colkin gets a point. He is up 4-2.
Mark, could you imagine how many points we would have lost had we answered Notre Dame for that? I mean, just cleared out of the show.
I feel like the rules are changing as we're going, but it's okay.
Yeah. What are you saying? Are you saying that I'm unfair, Mark? Is that what you're saying?
No, Eric said that.
Okay. Well, he hinted at it, but I'm going to be. It's a kind.
No, I think it is fair. I would just have been embarrassed to say Notre Dame. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. But it's not like Penn State is anything to brag about. I mean, they've got, as much as I dislike Notre Dame, I mean, Penn State's got some baggage in their closet. All right, let's go with number 6, the best mobster movie of all time. Eric McKinney, go.
All right, so there's 4 I think that I can pick from, but I'm not gonna do it to you. I'm not gonna list the 4, and I'm not gonna take it away from Mark. I'm gonna leave Mark. I'm gonna leave Mark the easy answer. I'm gonna say Goodfellas is the best mobster movie.
Mark, what is it?
And I know there's some low hanging fruit there for Mark to grab.
Of course there is.
Look, the answer. Look, my low hanging fruit was Goodfellas, but because you left the other big old juicy apple there, it's The Godfather. There's only 2 answers here as far.
Well, there's 3. There are 3.
No, Godfather 2.
Right,
Godfather 2 is.
Yeah.
God,
look, if you can't have Goodfellas, you want The Godfather. One of those 2 movies is going to be in my DVR if I'm stuck on a stranded island.
no love for Godfather 2 in this group. I'm a little bit surprised.
That was set, so that would have been my pick over 1.
So you have
Goodfellas, Godfather 2, Godfather 1.
So you have the original Godfather 3rd on your list. Very interesting. I actually think that Godfather is the right answer. I think the original Godfather is the best mobster movie of all time. Godfather 2 is great. Goodfellas is great. I don't have a thing bad to say about either one of those. But watching Michael go from where he starts to what he becomes at the end of that first film is just fantastic. So we're going with the original Godfather. It's getting ugly. I mean, it's now 5-2 Culkin. So we need to go on a run, but obviously question number 10 can rescue people who are behind because I cheat. Number 7, USC defensive player, Mount Rushmore. Give me your 4. McKinney, since you're trailing, I want you to go first so that you get to give your answer without any interference from Mark. Go ahead.
So on this one, I wanted Mark to go first so that I could sneak like a couple other names in, but I got to go with my
I'll
real
go first.
4.
Okay,
I'm
he'll go
out.
first. No, fine. Eric, you
I'm out. Get on the
forfeited your
bench, Eric.
opportunity to go first. Mark, go ahead.
All right. We're only allowed 4 on our Mount Rushmore, right? Just
How many faces are on Mount Rushmore, Mark? You just lost a point. It's 4-2. Go ahead.
My Mount Rushmore, even though I'm not going to win this selection, is going to be Ronnie Lott, Junior
Yep.
Seau, Chris Claiborne, and because everybody needs a little bit of a nut job hanging up, Brian Cushing.
Interesting. Okay, McKinney, you got
All
your
right.
pitch. You get
So
your
he
second.
did. Yeah, Mark did not take Richard Wood or Troy Polamalu, so I'm going those 2, and then Lott and Seau are my 4. Chris Claiborne, I'm glad he mentioned. Tim Ryan is a name that never gets mentioned. If we're talking about just USC production, again, you have like this USC defensive Mount Rushmore that also carries over to the NFL and is just constantly talked about by everyone. You could put together another group. And I feel like Tim Ryan, just for what he did at USC, belongs in the discussion of that. But Lott, Seau, Richard Wood, and Troy Polamalu would be my 4.
Yeah, you could throw Mark Carrier out there too, right? An under the radar guy who was a 2-time All-American and I think the number 6 pick overall in the NFL draft. Lott and Seau are obvious. Anybody who doesn't put Lott and Seau on their list gets immediately disqualified. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I think Eric is right. I love Chris Claiborne. I love Brian Cushing. It's not obvious to me that Cushing was the best linebacker on his team. Maybe he was, but I don't know that he was. And Claiborne was spectacular. It's not fair to him that he had to play for Paul Hackett, but he did. And that means that he played on a lot of crappy football teams. McKinney wins the point. It's now 4-3. Okay.
Look, I'm obviously not going to tell you how to do your job. There were 4 answers in that question. We can move on though.
I think we need a bigger Mount Rushmore for USC. That's all.
Okay. I mean, I didn't know why you were starting to speak again, Eric. I gave you the point. I took a point away from him. You're within 1, and then you started to talk. One of the things that I
Oh, you cut out when you took it away. I didn't hear you took it away from him. That's a great decision. You cut out for a second there.
Yeah. One of the things that I try to teach young lawyers is to know when to shut up. When the judge is going your way, just be quiet, sit down. Don't say another word. All right, it's 4-3. We got ourselves a ball game. Question number 8. I'd rather a flesh-eating virus consume me from the toes up than to watch this again. Eric McKinney, go first.
Look, the answer is the USC Texas Rose Bowl game, and that's just too easy because we talk about that all the time. So I'm gonna go kind of off the radar here, and maybe it sets it up for Mark to swoop in and get an easy one. The 2018 second half USC offensive performance against Cal would be my answer here, where they scored no points. They threw a shotgun snap backwards about 40 yards for a safety and gave up a 14-0 lead in a 15-14 loss. Again, not anywhere close to the heartache of the Rose Bowl, clearly, but just in terms of how that played out and just pure frustration, ineptitude, that one's up there.
Okay, Mark Holkin.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the USC Texas game, put that away. Any game that Cade McNown beat USC. Pick one. Doesn't matter.
I'm not picking one. You're picking one.
It doesn't matter. There were 4 of them. There were 4 of them. I don't want to watch. I don't want to watch any of those 4 ever again.
I was at all of them, and I don't know why you're trying to tell me to pick. Look, nobody gets a point. Eric's answer was weird, right? That's just weird. Everybody knows that. That doesn't even make sense. That's not even the top 100. And Culkin was intentionally difficult. He's screaming at me to pick an answer. I don't even know what you're doing over there, but you gave away a point. It's 4-3. Question number 9. This song should be the theme song for the 2024 USC football season. Mark, redeem yourself, please.
Bring it back. One time, Eminem, period.
Eric?
Because we've talked about being physical at the point of attack on both lines, hard-hitting-ish Big Ten talk. Let's go. Mama said knock you out, LL Cool J. Don't call it a comeback for USC after last season going into this one.
That's a strong answer. I liked Mark's answer, and I was ready to give him a point, but you came in and just swooped it away. It's 4-4 going into the last question, and this is the best question we've ever asked on this show. All right, here we go. Number 10. Tell me why the other guy should forfeit 2 of his current points. McKinney, go.
Mark didn't know that there's 4 people on Mount Rushmore. Like, what?
No.
That's it. That's it. I mean, 2 points, 4 to 6, I think.
This is called fake news right here. It's not that Mark didn't know how many.
You don't get to argue his answer. Give your own. You don't get to argue his answer. Give your own. Why should he lose 2 of those current points?
Because he's creating fake news. That's a bad narrative right there. I don't mind losing points when they're legitimate.
That much is clear, Mark. That much is clear.
But yeah, don't make up stuff. Don't make up news. Don't make up fake.
McKinney's answer was not fake news. It was legitimate. The final score is 4-2 McKinney. Congratulations, Eric, on another big win. Congratulations, Mark, on learning something important about your country, i.e. the number of heads there are on Mount Rushmore. Guys, is there anything else that we want to tell the people before we sign off?
Yeah, everybody go back and watch the film.
I think Mark just learned. I think Mark just learned it's not a lie if you believe it.
All right, I guess that's it, fellas. Hey, next week we're gonna have a lot to talk about with the spring game and the transfer portal. It's going to be a 9-hour show. So if what you've been thinking is I need more Inside the Trojans Huddle in my life, next week it's going to be the longest show in history. We're going to have to get we're going to take nap breaks in the middle of it. It's going to be so long. Until then, fight on, everybody.